Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth webinar in our series of uh, discussions on how Indian startups can expand to the GCC and the wider MENA region. So if you've been with us since the beginning, you know that we have been trying to demystify the GCC and the MENA region for tech companies, especially in India and Southeast Asia, and how they can expand quicker and better into this region. This region has been viewed typically as sort of a black box, as a monolith by tech companies from outside the region, and which has made them kind of hesitant to enter as their preferred choice of overseas destinations. And we are going to attempt to try to demystify it a bit for you. We started this series with a simple question in mind as to why don't Indian startups, or at least more of them, come to the UAE or the wider GCC region, given our historical ties with the region and India. And why do we see very few unicorns or large established startups or tech companies having a presence in the Middle East? So we started speaking to a lot of tech companies in India and trying to, sort of find an answer to this question. And we found a couple of similar responses from them. Some of them being that, hey, why should we focus outside of India because India is big enough for us? Or we prefer to go to countries where, again, there are large Indian diasporas, for example, the UK or maybe even the US. Places in Southeast Asia like Singapore. So we have been trying to showcase the GCC and specifically the UAE as a viable destination for Indian startups. And we tracked more than 40 startups who have already entered this country, this region, and specifically the UAE. And most of them choose UAE as their first entry point into the region. And which is what when we speak to startups from India and from across the world, we specifically tell them that the UAE is a launch pad for the rest of the region, because once you enter the UAE and you're established here, you can get a fair idea of the region as well, including other large countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, for example. And it becomes easier to expand into the rest of the region. We have seen a lot of investor interest, regional investors who are expanding their focus into investing into Indian startups. We have a couple of names which are quite active in the Indian market, such as AlphaWave, and you have large sovereign wealth funds as well who are investing in large tech companies as well. So to bring you back to our series of webinars is we've been trying to showcase industry leaders, Indian startups who already have an established presence in this region and who are looking to expand further as well. And as part of that, today I would like to welcome Kshitij from ZeoAuto and Ajith from CamCom, who will be joining us on our discussion. Hi Kshitij, hi Ajith, how are you? And to kick things off, we will get a short presentation from Kshitij about ZeoAuto and how they are expanding into the GCC, what they're all about, and the future plans as well. So Kshitij, if you want to take over, that would be great.
Yeah. Hey Romit, thanks a lot for having me over. And thanks for giving us time to showcase our product. Hello everyone, welcome to this seminar. So I'll quickly take you through our journey, what Zeo is, how we got started and where we are right now, and our plans going forward with the MENA region and overall. So I'll quickly share a presentation. Could you allow that, Romit?
Yes, I think you can already do it.
Okay, let me check. Can we see, can everyone see the deck here?
Yep.
Great. So I'll start with a small introduction of what Zeo is trying to do. So we as a product are trying to help users service the largest number of stops in the quickest amount of time at cheapest cost. So these stops may be delivery stops, home servicing stops, anyone who is doing a large number of visits on a daily basis. We would help them achieve that in a cost efficient manner. So that's the mission we got started with. I have a question here for the wider audience. So how many deliveries do you think happened in 2021? Like what's guess that you would have?
Are you talking about all over India?
All over the world. Yeah.
All over the world. I don't know, billions maybe.
Yeah. So some wild guess, ballpark figure maybe.
I don't know, 5 billion deliveries.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else would love to guess? Like, I'd love to see some more responses in the chat section.
Right. You guys can respond in the chat as to what you think is the number of deliveries that happened last year.
All across the world. So taking the time considerations, I'll quickly move forward. Yeah. So these are the number of deliveries that happened in 2021. It's 157 billion deliveries. That means that 20 deliveries for every person on earth, or effectively 5,000 deliveries happening per second. And this is growing 20% year on year. And this number is expected to reach around 266 billion in 2026. So everything is moving online. We see everything like delivered online. This includes the services as well. And that's where we saw a huge opportunity, and we started with our initial product. So I'll take you through what challenges we saw and how did we overcome them. What's the product right now? So in the delivery segment, of the overall cost, the major cost that is incurred is in the last mile delivery segment. It is like the 53% of the cost is incurred in the last mile delivery segment. And the major reason for that is that drivers are not using this, drivers are not provided with the best tools for them to deliver. Last mile delivery is the shortest path of the delivery, but it constitutes 53%. There's no visibility in drivers' current location. The routes that are provided to the drivers are not being used, and there's no effective customer communication with the actual driver who is delivering. A lot of times the customers are not able to contact the actual drivers who are delivering, and these are some main reasons because of which the delivery cost is too high. The Amazons of the world, the FedEx might have a lot of these functionalities, but then there are thousands of small couriers who do not have such products available to them. On route optimization software specifically, $5 billion is spent, but this does not translate into savings. And why does that not happen? The major reason is that the drivers are given a route and they are not following those routes. They are or even big companies like Amazon, FedEx, and all the software are aimed at the logistic managers or the fleet owner who is actually creating the routes for his drivers. And the major reason is that these softwares are mostly sold to the logistic managers, and that is where most of the functionalities are built keeping in mind the owner or the fleet owner, and the driver's app is mostly an afterthought. I would pause a bit here for anyone to ask questions. Like, you could always put in questions in the chat and we'll take them at that. But would love to have any questions if you have anything right now, or I shall proceed further.
I think we can proceed and we see, gather all the questions at the end, and then we can try to answer those.
Sure. So we solved for this problem. Initially, we only launched and focused on the driver's experience. We just launched a driver app where any driver, whatever means he was getting the routes, be it in an Excel format or a manifest that was given to him, he could just enter all his addresses and get an optimized route. For about a year, I just focused on drivers' feedback, kept improving the product, had like hundreds of thousand drivers use us in a lot of different countries. Once we perfected the drivers app, we moved on to building the fleet platform for SMEs, courier companies, deliveries, restaurants, and a lot of our users right now are into home services segments, real estate inspection segments. And then we plan to go further deep from here by adding value-added services for all these SMBs in different verticals wherever they are present. So I'll quickly take you through the product. So this was the actual product that we launched for the driver. So as a driver, you could enter all the addresses, you get an optimized route in a sequence. You have tons of preferences on all the stops. Like you could put in the slot times, you could put in the number of parcels. There are multiple ways to import addresses. You could import Excel, you could voice input, you could manually type, or you can even scan QR codes on the barcodes that are put on your delivery packages. And then you just optimize, and there's a seamless integration with all the navigation providers, which includes Google Map, Waze, TomTom. So whichever country driver is using whatever navigation software, we have a small widget running on top of these apps, which guides them to the next stops that they have to deliver. And then the drivers can always add trip notes. He can skip a particular address, he can come back to a stop, he can always re-optimize routes if there are live addresses coming in. So all these functionalities, which were very critical for a delivery person, were not there when we started. We quickly built all these. We translated the app to around 51 languages, which covers 90% of the world population. And this has given us major inroads in almost 150 countries around the world. And this we thought because a lot of drivers were immigrants, and we started with Spanish, Portuguese, but then as the app grew in Latin American market, we started converting it to other languages as well. Once the driver app was there, we started building the fleet platform, making it easier for the fleet owner to have a complete visibility into the driver's operations. We provided live location for the owners to see. We provided customer communication by the driver. There's a real-time communication between the owner and the driver. If there are real-time stops coming in, you can always re-optimize, delete stops in real time, and the entire route will get re-optimized. So this is how we plan to move going forward. This is the web product for the fleet owner. You can have all your drivers here, the routes listed on the right panel, and then you would see all the routes on the top. So these are some functionalities which help us differentiate from other players. So you could optimize all the addresses amongst hundreds of drivers. So if you have thousands of addresses, you could put in all those addresses using Excel, or you can integrate with Shopify, WordPress, a lot of third-party stores that you do, or you can integrate with an API, and then we optimize all those routes for you. You have live delivery and driver status in real time. You can track drivers, see their analytics in terms of their movements or delivery times. You can capture proof of deliveries and have tons of reports there. So this is the fleet platform which we have right now. And then the plans that we have is very, very clear, crisp, easy and affordable. You do not overpay for anything. There's a fixed cost that you pay on a monthly basis based on what your requirements are. So we have a flexi seat plan where if your drivers keep coming and going in your business, you can just take up a seat and assign and reassign it to new drivers. Versus a fixed subscription where if you know that this driver is going to stay with me for the next entire year, you could take a fixed subscription for that driver, or even an yearly subscription for that driver. So the plans are very crisp. We do not overcharge or charge on the number of deliveries you are doing on a daily basis or a monthly basis. So once you take up the plan, you have unlimited deliveries available for that particular drivers. We were global from day one. We are present in 150 markets. The top 8 countries here generate 80% of our revenue, but still it's spread across all these countries. So Brazil is the largest revenue contributor for us, contributing somewhere around 20-25%. We have US, UK, Chile, Italy, France. So you see, we have a major presence in the American market, Latin America, and then presence in European countries like Italy, France, and then good presence in Singapore, Malaysia as well. Malaysian and Singapore markets are catching up a lot on the fleet owner platform that we have built. So that is where we are in terms of the progress. So we have helped drivers create around 6.3 million routes so far, and we have helped drivers deliver to 120 million deliveries in just last 2 years, and over 100 million deliveries have come in the last year itself. We have saved drivers 780,000 kilometers. We have helped them save 27 million hours, and this is the dollar amount that's saved by optimizing routes for them. We have around 800 drivers using us across Android and iOS platforms. We have 4,000 businesses who have used us, hundreds of paying businesses using us all across a lot of different countries. And then we are present in 140, 150 countries right now. I'll quickly take you through a customer profile of ours and then open up for questions. So these are some of the type of companies who are using us. So grocery delivery companies in India, in Kansas City. We have pharmacies using us all across the globe. We have food delivery and cooking material delivery companies using us in Malaysia, components delivery company using us in Switzerland, luggage transfers. We have a courier delivery company using us in Brazil. So these are the type and variety of industries and companies using us in a lot of different markets. We have a shipping company in Finland, an inspection company in US, and these are just a few profiles that we have right now. These are the industries that we serve. So pest control, waste collection, home services, courier companies is of course like 30-40% of our user base right now, but then retail, furniture stores, wine, weed, medicine delivery, plumbing, electrician, cleaning, lawn moving. So we are present in all these segments, and that's where the next set of products that we are building for vertical integration. So a lot of these users are into home services, and they regularly ask for estimations, bookings, job scheduling, invoicing, and that's what we are creating with our newly launched product, which is Zeo Business, which is the OS for businesses. So that's all about Zeo. I'll just hold on for a sec here and open up for some questions.
Right. Everyone in the audience can send us our questions through chat. We have one here. Do you have a further breakdown of the 150 billion global deliveries? I'm sure there is a lot of data available online on segmented by country, by type of deliveries, and how much of that is only Amazon, right? I'm sure we can find data like that online if you search for it. Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for your question. Right. So let me move on while we wait for more questions. Move on to the next part of this session, where we have Ajith as well joining us. Let me just share my screen as well. Hi, Ajith, welcome.
Hey, hi, Mohammed, how are you?
Good, good. Just give me 1 second. All right. Okay, here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Ajith also joining us, who is the co-founder and CEO of CamCom, which is award-winning computer vision tech startup from India, and they now have a very solid presence here in the UAE. They have been part of several very, very notable accelerator and incubator programs here, which are being conducted by the government itself. And they have also set up the first Vision Campus in the UAE, and if I'm not mistaken, the rest of the region as well. So welcome, Ajith, and we have already met Kshitij. So let me sort of kick this off, so because we have this session to sort of get your expertise and based on your experiences in the region, we want to get that out to some of the other early stage startups who are maybe looking to expand overseas from India. And since both of you have started and scaled businesses, globally, what kind of, sort of very preliminary or a very top-down advice would you give to, early stage founders looking to expand to the GCC? Ajith, what would be your sort of first impressions of those?
Let me start with an example of how and why we entered the GCC, sure, specifically through UAE. I think that may actually answer the question. One word, COVID. Adversity has opportunity, right?
Yes.
In many ways, the UAE was the only country in the region, and as a matter of fact, I would say to a certain extent in the world at that point in time, that actually had a crafted, calibrated response to the way that businesses could be run, as opposed to knee-jerk reactions that we were seeing around the world, right?
Absolutely.
So from that perspective, and that honestly is the reason why CamCom decided to look at the UAE and the larger GCC as a market. And I think you mentioned this in your introduction, that the UAE is probably the best launch pad. The demographics may not be that much, 11.8 million people, but they are early adapters of not just cutting edge technology, at many times bleeding edge technologies. So it's much more easier to kind of prove that your platform, your solution works, and then use that and build up the references to get into, say, a larger market like Saudi Arabia. We have customers in Egypt, for example. We had customers in Egypt even before we entered the Middle East region through UAE. But the very fact that you are in Dubai gives you a certain amount of referenceability within the GCC region. In many ways, it's almost like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, well, what happens in Dubai does not stay in Dubai. It continues to flow, right? Identify if there's an opportunity. Before you make the jump, definitely identify if the market is ready. I would very strongly urge B2C players not to jump in immediately. For the simple reason, let's look at the demographics. So 11.8 million people, 10% local, 90% expat, 22% of the population under the age of 18. Another 30% of the population earning a salary less than 3,500 dirhams. Then where is the market? So in many ways, these are simple demographics that you can keep in mind when you're jumping into a market, right? Enterprise solutions like ours, the number of enterprises, there are hardly any manufacturing bases in the UAE. But the larger service and the services piece of it, which is the large service centers, for example, the Alpha Thales, the AW Rostovanis, the car rental companies, the used car manufacturers, used car dealerships, they're all moving right now in that market. And that market is a good fit as far as we are concerned. So it helps us create that level of, we build up the traction with the customers, we convert them, and then use that as references to move to other markets. But make sure that you define that market very well before you jump in.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree on your breakdown of the demographic, because with just a population of around 10 million, prima facie, the UAE does not look like a very promising market to spend your money and time on, but the kind of access that it provides, and as part of our previous sessions, and we had other guests on this session, on our webinars, who have said things like, since you mentioned Egypt, is that Indian founders are coming to Dubai and they're meeting Egyptian founders and they're making connections there, and they're like, okay, let's expand into Egypt, where we already now have a connection. That is because we were in Dubai together at the same time, at the same place. So those kind of synergies is what the UAE and specifically, Dubai provide to Indian founders. Kshitij, what would be your take on the, advices to the first step early stage Indian startups would take when they're expanding into the GCC?
Yeah, so from my perspective, to land in a particular geography, so as you guys are also talking, it is important for you to segment your users. So if you are catering to consumers, you definitely have to segment and understand what's the potential there. But if you are in a B2B segment, there are two things that are very important. One is you have to have a local presence, or someone as a mentor or a partner in that geography who can guide you. And that's what we got from Tahseen. We understood the market. You guys helped us like connect to a lot of potential business clients there. So that is one very important thing when you are thinking about navigating a new geography for first time founders. The second thing that helped us a lot was like as a consumer product. So we are into SaaS, but a lot of our users are end drivers. So as a consumer product, it is important for you to have a local language. Like all our apps were translated into all these local languages, which gave us major inroads in these markets, and that has helped us get a lot of initial drivers and their feedback from the Dubai region. So a lot of our translations early on were not perfect, but then they helped us make it perfect, put in some manual efforts there. And once the drivers were on board, they helped us bring businesses which were employing them. So it was a bottoms up approach for us. So these are the two things that has worked well for us so far.
Right. I mean, for our Indian audience, just an FYI, we know that Arabic is one language, but there are actually many dialects, and the spoken Arabic sort of in Egypt is not maybe the same in Lebanon or Morocco or the UAE. So there are just slight, very crucial differences, which if you understand before you jump into this region would be of a great advantage to you, especially if you're looking to expand into the wider MENA region. Okay, so just to sort of switch track a bit, let's talk about investors. We have had, a lot of large ticket investors from the GCC who are, looking to invest in Indian startups, and both of you also have raised funding from some impressive investors. So would there be some kind of advice that you would give to founders who are trying to raise funding from say either tier 1 global VCs or GCC investors, or maybe even landmark strategic players in the region? What would you tell them? Ajith, maybe you can take this first.
Single word answer to raising funds is don't. Unless you need it, please don't raise funds.
Yeah. Okay.
What are the most common pitfalls that people in the startup ecosystem do is raise funds when it is not required, right? Mm-hmm. And as you can see from the receding hairline and the gray hair, I've been around the block not once but multiple times. Mm-hmm. So see, any business by definition has to be profitable. Mm-hmm. The idea for any person setting out to create a business should not be to make it a unicorn. Mm-hmm. That honestly is irrelevant in business. A business has to generate revenues, it has to generate profits. Yes, there is a crucial role that venture capitalists play anywhere in the world in terms of being able to help you essentially go through that initial birthing process, then helping you with the funds to scale. But of late, and I'm sure you guys are already aware of it, the amount of money that a lot of these startups essentially have in their war chest, what exactly is it being used for? I mean, at the end of the day, somebody has to return that money. And there's a significant amount of pressure always on founders, and Kshitij will know this very well. To burn, when you race, you need to burn. It's like riding a tiger. You get bitten when you get on it, you get bitten while you're riding it, you get bitten when you get off it. So unless you know for a fact that you need that funds and you need that funds for a specific purpose, please don't raise. If you need it for a specific purpose, make sure that you understand why you are raising it, who you're raising it, because it's not just about money. That money should obviously help you scale, but along with it comes the networks, the ability to open doors, the larger ecosystem that they provide you access to. Without that, money in many ways is useless. Right? So my suggestion to most founders and those who I speak to is, unless you are 100% sure that this money is going to be needed for you to do X, Y, Z, don't raise. If you know that you need that money to do X, Y, Z, then raise it and use it judiciously. And by judiciousness, what I mean there is, please make sure that your business has a good profitability. I have come across people who have raised $600 million, $700 million. I was having a drink the other day with one such co-founder of a unicorn. And he was quite surprised when his investors, after 6 years, turned around and asked him, what is your path to profitability? So,
right.
That is a kind of mindset that unfortunately has developed in the startup ecosystem, for that matter, anywhere in the world. Yes, there is a significant amount of interest from VCs in the Middle East region. Some of them you have already named, Alphavate. There are others also, the large sovereign funds. And recently, Abu Dhabi Sovereign Investment Fund has invested in a bunch of startups. But most of them are much later in the game. I mean, you're talking about Series D and above. It's not coming in at C or it is coming in pre-Series A, Series A, Series B. Those kinds of funds are typically available when you are raising in excess of $500 million. So I don't see a lot of, I personally think there's a lot of scope for venture capitalists in the region who are focused specifically on the seed and pre-series A level. So ticket value is somewhere ranging between $250,000 to maybe at best $2 million. I don't see a lot of people, and because there it's necessary to leap of faith. It's very easy to go and bet money on something that has already grown, scaled, and you're essentially nothing doing. At the end of the day, you're not adding much value outside of the money that you're putting in. So there really isn't a robust ecosystem in the Middle East for that. I think there are a lot of players trying to do it, but unfortunately, I don't think that has paid a lot of dividends. But the ecosystem that has been created in UAE through the Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund, through the Dubai Startup Hub program that's conducted by the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, they're not about funding, but they provide you with the necessary base in which to understand the market and the legalities associated in terms of how to do business in that region. How does the law of the land essentially work when as far as taxation is concerned, and as far as the various commercial contracts that you enter into are concerned. So my suggestion to most people is, if you have an idea and as an Indian startup you're going into the Middle East, don't go into the Middle East with the intent to start raising money. Right. Go in with the intent to do business, right? And profitable business.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that point. We have a lot of startups who get in touch with us and with the specific interest of just raising money and then taking that money, stuffing their bags and going back home. And the chase for valuation, versus the point you made about chase for valuation versus profitability is a whole webinar, seminar series in itself. But yes, a lot of startup, the era of easy money from the Middle East or the petrodollar funding from the Middle East is over. When we have helped quite a few startups in this region get access to funding, to partnerships, etc., and across the board, we get very similar responses from stakeholders here saying that, listen, we are very interested. If you're interested in your tech, we want you to invest that money here. We want you to show your proof of concept or a pilot project, or we want you to be viable here. And we don't have problems with you taking the money and investing in other countries as well, but we need you to do it here as well. And unless and until you can do that, and you show commitment to the region, it's very difficult to raise money from the Middle East. Kshitij, your sort of take on it. You also have some sort of an exposure to this as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ajith when he says that don't raise money when you don't need it. So a lot of people who have joined us right now might be in the initial stages of their journey, maybe raising a seed or series A. Like always for us, like the focus has always been on delivering profitability, growing growing on a significant basis, on a month-on-month, on a yearly basis. And for founders who are just starting to look out and raise, the only advice that I would have is to raise from someone who can actually help you in the initial phases of your journey. Bring in that network for you in terms of help, legal help. Founders face a lot of trouble raising subsequent round if they could do that kind of introductions. So I would just advise people to know who you are raising from, especially in seed and pre-seed rounds. It's very small checks that you need to just get started, and then most of the focus should be on building a profitable venture from there. I understand, like seed, like not everyone would have access to 200K also when they are starting up. So that might be something that you would actually need. But once you have that kind of balance in your account, you should always be focusing on building a profitable product from there. And the angels who join you early on should always be there to guide you through geographies, their experience with other startups, how to navigate challenges, legal or otherwise. So that's my advice for. And then of course, like partnering with early stage accelerators, incubators always help. So for example, YC has helped us a lot in terms of all the SaaS deals that we got. So we were secured for a year or two with the AWS cost, the billing cost that we had early on. So that helps a lot. The network helps a lot. But then as Ajith mentioned, always focus on profitability unless like it's a hugely fast growing market and you need millions of dollars to scale. It definitely doesn't make that much sense.
Right. I agree with your points. You mentioned YC, Y Combinator, right? So let me sort of double click on that. I'm pretty sure if you have founders on our audience today, or even people from the tech ecosystem, they must have read the open letter that YC just published a couple of weeks ago about the funding doomsday that we are living through. So how much of that is true, and what are you seeing on the ground? Like, how bad is it right now for founders to raise money, or it really depends on which sector that you are based out of?
So what I have seen recently is the day when you would just tell a story or paint a picture and raise tons of money is over. There are still deals where a startup is growing very fast and it's getting good value. They can raise significant amount. If the business is profitable, if they are growing fast, they can still raise money. So I don't think there will be challenges for a good startup to raise money any point in time. If you are profitable for the next few months, over a year, just try to reduce your costs, try to grow like as you are growing, but don't overrun. So that's what my advice to all people, all everyone who is in that stage where they are not burning a lot but maybe experimenting with a lot of different products. Just focus on your products that are working well and keep growing for the next few months. So that's what I'm seeing. Like, but what I feel is it's never difficult for a good startup or a good product to raise funds in the market, whatever the conditions might be.
Right. Ajith, I see you nodding. Would you agree to what Kshitij just said?
I 100% agree. And, as an aside, since you mentioned about the open letter by YC, there's an open letter by Sequoia as well to their investee companies. My question honestly, to all these people is, you didn't see this 1.5 years ago? I mean, COVID happened. There's so much of money being pumped into the economy by government to ensure that the economies don't crumble. At some point in time, they were going to pull that money out. I mean, all the free flow money that was there was essentially because the government was pumping in the money. And this had to be anticipated 1.5 years ago. I mean, I really find it strange that founders have to be told by their investment companies that you need to be frugal, that you need to essentially conserve cash, that you need to be profitable. I mean, those are the basic tenets of any business.
Right. Absolutely true. I mean, and now we are seeing, the second order effects of all that money pumped into the markets in terms of inflation, right? Okay, so I mean, since you're talking about government, how would you rate, in terms of importance, is it for startups to engage with the government or sort of government-linked investors as they scale into the Middle East or into the GCC? Ajith, you have experience with this when you partnered with the MBR Innovation Accelerator and the Dubai Chamber and DTEC as well from Dubai Silicon Oasis. So how would you rank, in terms of importance to link up with the government objectives in the region?
See, the government objectives specifically in the UAE are very important because, like I said, they have a plan, they implement the plan. And if you fit into that plan, chances are that you have a success, right? So it's a very good idea to engage with these key stakeholders. And how do you get access to these key stakeholders? It's through programs like the Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund, the Startup Hub program, and a bunch of others. Intelac is something that is run by Dubai Tourism for specifically for I think Emirates Airlines. Mm-hmm. So if there's a specific segment that you intend to target, then it's important for you to understand what the government's plan is for that. So for us, when we were initially selected by the Dubai Chamber of Commerce as a part of that program, was to become an AI partner for Emirates Post. So Emirates Post is again, much like any other postal organization controlled by the government anywhere in the world, is trying to reinvent itself. And COVID kind of accelerated that progress because they have now become the last mile delivery partnership, which may be somebody that you might want to talk to because they have become the last mile delivery partner for a lot of the larger e-commerce retailers, the likes of Namshi and Noon and others, right? Because they have the infrastructure and they are essentially leveraging their infrastructure now, much like what Deutsche Post reinvented itself and what India Post is currently doing. The funny thing is, Romit, till date, I mean, despite having been chosen, signed up as the AI partner for Emirates Post, we don't have a single engagement going on with Emirates Post because no decision has been taken. Okay, so those are, I mean, that's a good thing and a bad thing, because it also goes to show that the government in many places still essentially follows the same thing. Mm-hmm. But because of that, we landed up in Dubai in the middle of COVID, right? And it was during GTEC in 2000 and. I think that was the only live event that was held that year. Yeah. We were at the booth because the chamber had given us a booth, and in walked a gentleman with an entourage who was not wearing a badge. And I had no idea who it was, except that he was important because he had the entourage around him. So I explained for about 4 or 5 minutes in terms of what we do. And then he said, he turned around and told one of his colleagues, Marwan, have a look at this. So I honestly, very embarrassingly had to ask Marwan, who was it that I was speaking to? And then he told me, oh, that is Mr. Al-Fateh. So, because everybody is wearing a mask in those days, you can't actually make out who's who. Yeah. So that one thing again changed, our outlook for that market because suddenly that, a bunch of other conversations came up around the same time. So, what you actually intended to do might not actually be the outcome of, once you essentially start your foray. But people like Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund, a bunch of training programs, specifically on finance, on legal, on incorporation, banking, all that is information that they give. And you have a very good cohort, a good cohort from where you learn from each other, right? The second piece is people like the Dubai Silicon Oasis, the Dubai Technology Entrepreneurs Campus. So when we set up office there, they were also very keen because DSO is now part of the larger blueprint of the Dubai government, where they want to make it a very smart city. And it dovetails very well into our strategy of using computer vision at multiple levels, right? So we are in many ways a industry agnostic platform, which essentially looks at defect and damage. Anything made out of metal, plastic, and or glass. Fortunately for us, 63% of the products in this world are made from metal, plastic, and glass. So that is what we focus on. And we continue to build. So we have partners, who essentially build on top of our solution. So larger system integrators in the region, like Vistas Global, including likes of Indian companies, Wipro, Infosys, etc. They use our solution to build literally no-code, low-code solutions that are industry-facing.
Right.
So it's always important to build that ecosystem. Now, direct answer to your question was, was there an impediment through this entire journey? Banking. Banking is a major problem, right? We did not have a bank account for 9 months. I did not have the ability to get my revenues into a bank in Dubai because of the anti-money laundering treaty, everything else that has been currently been put in place. But that is a huge problem because as a business, if you are unable to receive revenues, then what do you do? So if that small problem is taken care of, I think the rest of the ecosystem is pretty good.
Right, absolutely. I sort of agree to your points there. When we help support startups, entering into the region, we always advise them to see if they can align with government objectives, especially in the UAE, because the UAE has been, very active in, pushing for the fourth industrial revolution and building a knowledge-based economy to diversify away from, just hydrocarbons. And Dubai is leading the charge on that. So they have a lot of initiatives where they support very specific sectors, which Indian startups can, come in and take advantage of. And as you mentioned, it opens doors for you in expected and unexpected ways, to take advantage of. So we sort of analyzed around 40-50 startups, Indian startups, who have entered the MENA region over the last several years. And with most of them who have just entered the UAE and very few of them, actually a handful of them, just ventured into Saudi Arabia and maybe Egypt. And in fact, we just found a couple of people who are actually in Egypt. So since Ajith, you mentioned that you're in Egypt, and Kshitij, since you are all over the world, what are some of the challenges the startups would face when they're entering into, when they're going beyond the UAE, for example, if they're entering into Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Qatar or Egypt, for example, what would you advise the founders to take into account?
For us, two major challenges were in taxation. So understanding how do we provide taxation, how do we charge our customers, what kind of revenues do we put out to the government. So understanding these in various different markets was important for us. And for us, it was important to partner with payment providers who could handle a lot of these for us. The second is hiring in local geographies. So if you are present in a particular geography where you do not have a partner, you have to hire someone either on a contract basis or maybe like on a full-time role. Understanding how do you hire them, what legal challenges do you face there are something that you should be keeping in mind when migrating into a particular, when going into a particular region. Then communication with your customer is definitely important. So how do you do that? How do you understand their feedback? So product can be generic, but it needs to be adapted to local needs. And you have to have a regular flow of feedback coming in from your customers from all these regions. So that is the third challenge that we faced and navigated, like mostly through some mid-party like translator, or maybe using a lot of tools that are available to us. So those are the three things that we faced.
True. I agree. Ajith, your comments on this?
Honestly, there isn't a lot of information available about GCC countries outside of the UAE online. If it was available, I think it may be in Arabic, because of which in many ways, the ability to do secondary research is limited. Okay, so that means you are completely dependent on a local partner. Now, even to find a partner, I mean, how do you do the necessary due diligence? Because, literally every person that I've met in the Middle East region tells me, oh, Saudi is your biggest market. The second sentence is, oh, but be very careful. So, it's a fairly contradictory.
Yeah.
But, so any one of these organizations like MBRIF or others that exist, for example, in Bahrain or in Saudi, in
Mhm.
Oman. There can be a larger confederation of these, because at the end of the day, at some point in time, this is what I feel, there is going to be a economic union of these states because it makes more sense to have that heft.
Mhm.
If they were to essentially align to ensure that the benefits that the startups bring to the table from an economic perspective has a penetration with the larger market, it just makes it that much more easier. See, otherwise you essentially spend so much of time trying to figure out, as Kshitij said, what is the taxation in a specific country? I mean, what is the difference between a free zone company and a mainland company? How is it different in Qatar? How is it different in Saudi Arabia? Right? Why do I mean, do I need a partner or don't I need a partner?
Right.
So these are all multiple questions that come up. And unfortunately, the co-founders in many ways are trying to run a business. They are not trying to figure out the nuances of a taxation regime in a specific country.
Yep.
So over a period of time, you essentially go after the low-hanging fruit. Where,
Yep.
you mentioned at the beginning, the US is an automatic choice because you understand it very well. You understand UK very well. You understand Singapore, Australia. But there is not so much of understanding of the Middle East region. So maybe that is something that if something can be put in place to facilitate that, I think it would help.
Right, and I think that was part of the reason why we felt that we need to do something like this out in public to sort of share with the Indian tech community, not just the issues that are faced, but try to even demystify it just a little bit, so it can be easier for them to make a decision on whether to even consider moving, base to the UAE and the further MENA region. Right. So I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody has heard in some way or the other that the UAE and India signed a trade agreement very recently called the CEPA. And we strongly believe that it represents a very strong opportunity for the Indian tech ecosystem to expand into the region, starting with the UAE. I mean, they have the Indian and UAE governments have already launched something called the India UAE Startup Bridge. And there's been a lot of press about crypto founders running and coming to Dubai. Do either of you see any specific areas of opportunity for Indian startups in the MENA region? Like, are there some areas which you feel that are really untapped and Indian tech can sort of come in and solve those kind of problems for some quick wins?
I would say fintech, because for the simple reason, I mean, till date, the banking system, the technology that helps automate the banking system in the UAE is probably about 20 years behind the rest of the world. So, I think there is enormous opportunity for fintechs, essentially to get a lot of these banks to become cloud native, to figure out ways in which you can do it with checks. So correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but is there even a mobile wallet in the UAE yet?
There are a few, but nobody uses them. So, yeah.
So, I mean, that is what comes to my mind. I think fintech is a huge opportunity.
Right. I agree. Kshitij?
I heard UPI was making some moves there, like maybe partnering with governments to implement what we have implemented here in India.
Yeah, the RBI has just released a vision document for 2025 where they want to make UPI and RuPay, global, but manage the data locally. There's a lot of nuance to that, but there is something there. Ajith, how about AI, computer vision? Do you see a lot of space there for Indian companies to come in and put their flag?
Absolutely. See, at the end of the day, vision, specifically the area that we deal in, because AI is a very, very vast space. Vision has typically been used for three things, right? I mean, there's people, which it has been used and misused. And governments have been at the forefront of harnessing, human or AI specific people.
Yeah.
There is, of course, place, which helps hugely in the case of tourism. And, I think startups that have a tourism focus should definitely look at vision in the tourism space. in the last space, which is where we operate, which is products. I know it's not the most coolest thing, but the area that we operate in has a direct impact on top line and bottom line. So customer satisfaction is all dependent on quality, and that is where we operate. I think there's enormous opportunity there. Enormous opportunity there. UAE specifically because of the tourism focus. And I honestly haven't come across any person doing vision solutions specific to tourism so far. And virtual reality, augmented reality. I think these are things that will have huge resonance in the market, and I think there are definitely opportunities.
Right, absolutely. Right. I mean, we in part of our previous sessions, we had the MENA CEOs of large Indian, startups like Lenskart and Cars24 who are here, and they mentioned some very interesting points. Like there's a lot that the UAE specifically can learn from the Indian tech ecosystem, and that Ajith, you just mentioned fintech, right? Are there any other areas of technology where you think that the UAE can learn from India, or even conversely, something that is existing here in the UAE can be easily taken back to India for some quick wins?
Would you want to go first? I've been hogging all the questions, so please.
Please go ahead. I have some limited experience, like understanding the MENA market. Please go ahead.
As a matter of fact, Cars24 is one of my customers in India. Right. So,
are they present there in the UAE MENA region?
Yes.
Wow. And doing pretty well. They've become now, if I'm not mistaken, the largest. But largest is a relative term. The largest, the third largest in India at 1.3 billion people, and the largest in the UAE with 11.8 million. You can do the math in terms of how that pans out. There are definitely learnings from the Indian startup ecosystem that the UAE can have. One is, and I've been asking this question of most of the people that I've interacted with. What exactly is the difference between the MBRIF program, the Dubai Startup Hub program, the DTEC Sandbox, and a multitude of other programs that are already there? They all seem to be cannibalizing the same market.
Right.
In India, there are specific programs, specifically tailored to the requirements of, let's say, a corporate startup alliance, right? Which is conducted by the Startup India program. There are others which are focused specifically on fintech, or there are on insurtech. I mean, there's the Insurtech Association in India. I think somewhere along the way, the corporates, the government essentially adopts technology much faster than enterprises in the region. I think the government should put the onus on enterprises to start moving quicker. The reason why you have an antiquated banking system is because the enterprises have been loath to invest and take a leap of faith on new technology, despite the fact that it has been proven elsewhere. Right? So if the government essentially pushes the enterprises to start adopting technology at the same pace as the government adopts, I think you're going to see a sea change in the way that the economy will flourish.
Right.
Can the Indian ecosystem learn from the UAE system? Absolutely, it can. Okay. The kind of access that they get to government stakeholders through these programs. I mean, all it required was one call from MBRIF for me to get in front of the Deputy Managing Director of Emirates. Right. So if I have to find a way to get in front of, let's say, the person who controls procurement in the Indian Defense Services, I don't even know their name. It's going to be one of those long, broad things.
Yes. I've seen the difference in that you mentioned because we help, as I mentioned, we help startups here in the UAE and the region, and we have experience in dealing with helping them in India as well. So, I mean, there is such a vast difference we have taken so many startups to sit in front of ministers and then, for example, heads of the transport department for the whole country, and it has been so easy to get access to them because they are the leaders of this country are very willing to have a sit down if your technology is promising enough, and they're willing to adopt it, and it just happens so quickly. On the other hand, trying to do that in India is such a long process, and you meet so many colorful people on the way. It can be done, but it's just a much longer process, and you have to spend much more time and probably even some money on it. So yes, access to deal makers and power brokers in the region is much easier. At least it's much quicker. So I completely agree with your point there. Coming to a final sort of a non-serious question, there's been a race in this region between the UAE and Saudi Arabia on who's going to lead the region in terms of technology. The UAE, of course, has a head start, but Saudi Arabia has a huge war chest in which they are sort of deploying at very regular intervals now to sort of shore up their technological ecosystem. So who do you think wins out of the two of them, or do you see them sort of coming together and acting as a union of sorts?
I feel there
Sorry.
would definitely be competition going forward. But Dubai and UAE region has definitely made its own brand in terms of a lot of different communities across the world. In terms of startup communities, a lot of Indian founders, as you mentioned, in crypto are moving to Dubai. There has been this CEPA agreement that has allowed Indians to move there. So in terms of current understanding, I definitely think UAE is far ahead. But as you mentioned, they have like Saudi Arabia would have a war chest that they can put in and make things easier for people to come and build things.
Right.
So
Right. Absolutely. Ajith, who's going to win?
See, war chest is two things, right? War chest consists of money. That is one. The other one is demographics. People. Right, you need to create a market. Saudi Arabia wins hands down there because 35 million people, fairly self-sufficient in terms of having a robust manufacturing sector. The services sector is picking up as well. UAE is obviously going to be handicapped because of that particular issue. But the pace of adoption is where UAE wins. But like I said, that is reflected only in the government space. It's not reflected in the enterprise space.
Yes.
Which is a dichotomy which I am unable to fathom, honestly. Because you would have thought it would be the other way around. Because the enterprises would want to push the government to adapt new things, but there the enterprises seem to think that it's okay, we'll take a step back and wait. Saudi Arabia, because of the war chest now, I'm talking about the money, with all these Red Sea developments that are coming up and the huge infrastructure that is being set up there, I think at some point in time will become the leader. Because they have a much more focused view in terms of what needs to happen, and in many ways, whatever UAE learned through trial and error, Saudis don't have to, because there's already a precedent in terms of what the best practice is.
Right. So you're saying Dubai is going to be a victim of its own success?
I think Dubai will, at some point it has to happen, because the demographics, unless they do something very seriously about it, I think that is going to be a problem. But at some point, I think there is going to be a union. GCC is today not an economic union, but I think at some point in time that economic union will happen as well, and where the learnings that all these states have, be it Qatar, or be it Bahrain, or Oman, and others, I think everybody will benefit.
Right. Very interesting point there. Right. So we are almost at the end of our session. I would like to, thank both of you for joining, and the rest of our audience as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we at Tahseen Consulting, we help tech companies, get access to the region. We help you with, engaging stakeholders, and we help you talk to regulators. We help you to push them to move faster as well, even when they are fast. Sometimes startups move faster as well, and to influence regulations as well. And if you have any questions for us, please feel free to send me an email or send me a text, and I'll be more than happy to reach out to you. And once again, thank you, Kshitij and Ajith, for joining us. I'm sure members of our audience will take a lot of what you said back today, and sort of hopefully look at UAE and the wider GCC region with a little bit of more in-depth knowledge. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we're going to end our session here today. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a good day.